Hey y'all, Greg Armstrong here. I don't know if you've heard, but I've launched a brand new podcast called The Gospel and Race. We are not shying away from the critical conversation needed around how the church deals with race issues. How do we reconcile at the table in the kingdom? We're going to journey together, family. So I want you to jump in and follow us. I want you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, jump on Instagram, TikTok, as well as all of your podcast outlets. Wherever you like to download and listen, we will be there. I look forward to walking this journey out with you with the gospel and race. All right, we're back. Gospel and Race podcast, man. I'm excited about today. I think I say this every time we start a podcast. It is so important. It is so vital that we continue conversation of race and injustice and unity, reconciliation in the church. Now, here's the deal. Like we wanted to create a platform where people are not afraid to say race, racism, black, white, Latino, etc. And the church does not have to shy away from these conversations. But y'all know that already. So anyways, I'm Greg. It's good to have y'all here. And listen, on the pod today, my man, Paco Amador. Did I say Amador right?
Oh, yeah, you did.
Paco Amador, pastor in Little Village and here in Chicago. I'm so excited to have you, bro. And so y'all give it up.
Hey,
give it up for Paco is in the house.
Hey, it's an honor to be here. I'm excited to be here.
Man, listen, I'm a Paco fan.
Oh yeah.
Now we've
cool.
done a few things together, and you're here in the city, and I'm just grateful for your leadership, bro. And I just had to get you here so we can hang and talk. We're gonna talk today, man. It's gonna be fun.
Hey, I look forward to that.
It's gonna be
a
good
great conversation.
But let me get the official stuff out the way so we can just kind of clown up a little bit. All right. So. Pastor Francisco Paco Amador was born in Mexico City. Yeah. At the age of 14, he gave his life to the King. Following a desire to serve him for the rest of his life, Paco came to Chicago, trained at Moody Bible Institute in 90. You trained at Moody Bible Institute, and in 90, you visited Little Village neighborhood for the very first time. Awesome. And you fell in love with Little Village.
Oh, man.
As soon as you came, right?
I'll share a little bit about that, man. That was an encounter for me, an awakening.
Really?
That was amazing.
Man, you were a missionary in Spain. You worked at the Lawndale Christian Health Center, taught elementary school for 9 years, called into full-time ministry in 2005, married, 7 children. Jesus.
Now we have 8. We adopted a little girl from my neighborhood, so that's...
Stretch your hands towards Paco. He needs a miracle of rest. Paco, I got 3 kids, and I'm barely hanging on.
Hey, these gray hairs right here, man. It's like more gray hairs every kid.
Y'all welcome Paco.
Hey,
it's good to have you,
Thank
man.
you so much.
Hey, listen, let's jump right in. I just want to tell us your story.
Yeah.
Where you came from, and then I'm going to bring us up to what's going on now. We're going to have some dialogue. So tell us about you.
Excellent. Well, I was born in Mexico. At the age of 14, my father sent me to the States to do high school.
Really?
So I came to a boarding school for missionary kids. There was a missionary, which people would know now. He was I think President Trump helped him to get out of Turkey. He had been in jail for a while. His name I think is Andrew Brunson. So his family was part of a camp in Mexico. My father met him and then asked him, hey, what are you going to do with your son once he gets high school age? He said, I'm sending him to the States. There's a school that he can go to. And so my father belabored in being able to send my older sister and 2 older brothers. Then when the time came for me, I grew up the youngest. Yeah. My father sent me for 1 year to just get, it was a huge sacrifice for him. But for me to learn English, go back to Mexico, do a lot better if I was bilingual. And but I encountered Jesus in North Carolina.
Ooh.
He didn't have an accent though. He didn't have a southern accent. I encountered Jesus, radically changed my life, and in some way, God provided in supernatural ways for me to stay in North Carolina, finish high school. Well, as I was finishing high school, teachers are always asking, what do you want to do with your life? Somebody asked me, and I remember feeling like I don't know. I don't really care. All I want to do is serve Jesus.
Sure.
And I mean, I was.
So you got like transformed, bro.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
what kind of space was it saying that you guys say it was Pentecostal?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. The thing is that, which is part of this story of being an immigrant. I feel like when you leave a culture and go to another culture, you lose a lot. And as you lose, you lose your language. You lose your. I think the safety net. We all know. Okay, if I'm driving my car down the road right now, and I have a flat, what I do next is my network of support. Like I call a friend. I can dial whatever it is. But if you're in a different country where the rules do not apply, where you don't know any of the rules, I mean, that's soul searching and emptying. And so, anyways, for me, it was a shock. And I felt like in the depths of my emptiness, I had no other choice but to cry out to God. And it just literally, I cry out to God, and God answered in supernatural ways. I'll tell you a quick story. There was this young guy that was part of that school, and he 2.5 years earlier, he had been living as a missionary kid in Haiti, and he had a motorcycle accident.
Yeah.
He hit the back of a truck in the middle of the highway. It blasted his helmet, and his eye came out. His face was deformed, and that was 2 years before I met him. By the time I met him in high school, he had reconstruction surgery, but his face still looked pretty beat up. And I remember thinking, in high school, you worry about your looks the most than ever in life.
Yeah.
And he was the guy that definitely looked the worst, appearances. But it felt to me like he had this amazing depth. Like he had a deep attraction to his soul. Like on the outside, they were like, ooh, something happened to that guy. And the inside, they were like blown away. So there was something that attracted me to him. And he would always, I've never met a peer that talked like he just talked to Jesus. It was like, hey, this morning I was praying, Jesus told me this. I was like, what? I thought that was like conversation for religious people, not for friends. And he just gave me an incredible hunger for Jesus. Whatever he had, I wanted, in regards to his soul. And there was, externally, everybody else is like, beautiful, but internally, like, it's commotion and chaos. For him, externally, he was, beat up, but internally, he was at peace. And that was incredibly powerful, attractive to my soul that was hungry for God. And so I ended up crying out to the God that he talked about. And Jesus became in an incredible. One day I hated the Bible. The next day I just couldn't get enough of it. I'm like reading Paul. I'm like thinking everybody should read this. This is amazing. I just had been awoken in spirit. I mean, it was like alive. And so as we finished high school, teacher said, "What do you want to do?" It was like. Said, well, I don't know. I just want to serve Jesus. And someone out of the blue, just said, well, I think what you need to do, pointed at me. I'll never forget it. Said, you need to go to Chicago, go to Moody Bible Institute.
Really?
Nobody else was telling me what to do. Everybody else was like.
Were you professing your faith, though? Like, did they know?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody said, hey, there's a school, go to Moody Bible Institute. So I came. Somebody referred me to it. And so I ended up applying, back then there was no internet. Right. And I ended up in Chicago, and that changed everything, So,
wow. So that's how you got to Chicago.
That's how I ended up it's long story short.
Yeah. So you end up at Moody Bible Institute. Yes. You're an immigrant. You get radically born again. Yeah. You end up at Moody Bible Institute. And then you find yourself in Little Village. Oh, how did you even get there?
That's funny. You know what? I contend that Taco Bell runs on hungry college students. I always think there's nothing that
that's true.
A overheated tortilla, nasty beans and cheese. There's no hunger that it cannot cure. So college students just run. I remember being at Moody and somebody said, I'm hungry. And somebody else was like, let's go for tacos. I was like, amen. Yeah. And then this guy said, I know a place. It's called Little Village. I've never been to it. It's just 20-minute drive from Moody, and we drove in, and as you drove in, it was like it must have been like a May of the end of my freshman year at Moody, and we drove in, and people were out in the streets, and something inside of me just said, like, you're home. I hadn't felt at home. I had felt like I've been living with people that, that they were removed from me. Their experience was very different than me.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, I drive into Little Village, and everything was transformed and changed for me. I felt like this is home away from home. This is going to be home from now on. Something stirred deeply in me, and so since I graduated, I ended up going there. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you. A part of it was that God stirred something in you when you pulled in the Little Village, but then also, was this a Mexican community?
Yeah. Yes.
And so you didn't even know.
Yeah, I didn't.
You didn't even know 20 minutes from campus.
No.
So you know what I'm thinking about, Paco?
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking about you all are saying, let's go to Taco Bell, and somebody says, no, bro, let's go get the real. Let me give you the real thing. You pull in and just
I felt like everybody else was traveling, and I felt like I was just walking into my house. There was like something deep that I had never experienced up to that moment in my life.
What does that do for
home is here? Yeah.
What does that do for an immigrant from Mexico City?
Oh man,
who you felt all that time? Because, bro, I can imagine. Chicago's a diverse city, but coming to Chicago as an immigrant, going to Moody, classroom wasn't. That was unfamiliar.
Sure.
Right, professors are probably unfamiliar, and I imagine a lot of your time was spent in school. So to roll into Little Village, I could just imagine, like, I think about it as a black dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I've lived in some spaces where none of us were there. You know what I mean?
You feel foreign.
You're like, man, should I wear my hat? Like, should I? What should I do? Should I? But then I would find myself, when we lived in another city, I would find myself going to the part of the city where my people were.
Yes.
And I think there is. I know we kind of rag on tribalism a little bit in terms of community, but there is a sense of my people are here. Now, I've never been an immigrant, so I can't speak to that regard. So your experience is much deeper than mine, but I'm just trying to resonate with that feeling.
Man. Yeah.
With that feeling.
It's interesting. Jesus traveled to Egypt, like as a little kid. Most likely he didn't arrive into an Egyptian neighborhood where everything was in Egyptian. Most likely he arrived into a Jewish immigrant enclave.
He wouldn't have found his people.
Where there was kosher food, and people would naturally say, hey, where are you from? It's like, I'm from Galilee. It's like, Joseph is like, I'm from, so-and-so. And connections are made immediately. And all of a sudden you feel at home. It's interesting in the book of Jeremiah. So the people of Israel have been sent away. They're exiles.
Yeah, they're exiled, yeah.
The temple's destroyed. There's no Jerusalem as they know then. They've lost themselves, really. And then God sends them a letter through Jeremiah. And he says, hey, the reason why I sent you there. And this is what happened to me. And I feel like it took a while for it to happen to me. It said, the reason why I sent you there is like, even those words, you are not there by mistake. I sent you. In other words, I'm behind this whole thing.
Yeah.
And then he says, hey, plant garden. I have brought you even to the depths of the city of Babylon for you to be of grace and blessing to that city. You are, in essence, my envoys of grace into that city. And so he tells him, so plant gardens, so quit living like, out of a suitcase. So during those years, I had this encounter walking with Jesus that it's a book called, Justo Gonzalez wrote a book, and he talks about unpacking your emotional and spiritual suitcase. And I remember reading through that chapter and thinking, like, you're always thinking, next year I'm going to be back home. Next year I'm going to be back home.
Is that always a...
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, okay, like... something bad happens, like, oh, that's all right because I don't belong here. And I felt like God was saying, hey, open your suitcase, unpack it, and put it away. You're not traveling. This is home now. And I felt like that, the moment I walked into that neighborhood, I felt like I have a place for me here in this city that I've come to love. You know, it's among immigrant Mexicans.
Yeah.
And, you know, and this has been my ministry for the last almost 30 years, you know.
Oh, man.
So,
man, I just, bro, I just love your passion for Jesus, man.
Amen.
Like whenever you preach or speak, or I've been on a panel with you or something like that, you love Jesus, man. I appreciate your heart for the gospel as well. I want to know, like, from the eyes of a Mexican immigrant.
Yeah.
Like, I'm an African American, so I have my own set of experiences.
Yes.
But I was born here, right? And what is life like? The church needs to know, because in a lot of spaces, like, I think about some of the like some Mexican parishioners, you know, my church or from other parts. What is it? What's life like on a daily? And how do we, cool. We just need to know that, bro. We need to feel that. Can you help us with that?
Oh, yeah. Well, definitely. I think there's two extremes that I would talk about. On one side, I would say if you are a Mexican born in Mexico and moved here, which that was the case for me, the experience is very different than if you're a Mexican who was born in the States. In other words, you're American, but born to Mexican parents within the Mexican culture.
Sure.
And those two experiences are radically different, radically different. If you were born in Mexico, now, by the way, Mexican immigration to the States is at some point back in the late 90s, it was like, you know, it was at its height. And right around the bubble bursting in 2008, that was the first time when people started telling me, hey, Pastor, I'm just going back home, you know. Ya me voy a México de regreso. And I remember being shocked, like thinking, what? And it's almost like the reverse, you know. It's just a lot of people came. There was a flood, and then all of a sudden, the water started receding. And so Mexicans, by far, not coming to the States at all. I mean, it went from a fountain, like a overflowing cascade of water, to now a trickle. And now in 2024, Mexican immigrants in the States is like a little trickle. There's still people coming. By far, it's not what it used to be back in the 90s. I mean, back in the 80s, 90s, you know, that was like an overflow. The difference now is, I mean, people who still come from Latin America, but not Mexico. There's many of those immigrants, you know, which really is an overflow of what happened, or aftermath, I would say, of what happened during the pandemic in Central America and Northern South America. What we're seeing now in the States with all these immigrants is an aftermath of the pandemic, just hitting all these cultures hard. And the ones that were migrant in those countries ended up just saying, you know what, forget it, I'm making a trek. I'm literally walking 7 countries to get to America. And what we are getting now in America is a very small percentage of all the people that are now scattered outside their countries throughout Central and, you know, Central America and Mexico, and also Northern South America too. So anyway, so on one side, we have the Mexicans who were born in Mexico. On the other side, we have Mexican Americans, or the children of immigrants who have not ever known anything else other than America. And I think the way to describe them, they're two very different people. You know? They both living in the same home, you know. So on one side is me and my wife, on the other side is my children, and they have a radically different experience than I have of living in America in 2024. You know, I feel like I can always go back to Mexico, but for them it's a very different story. Mexico is not their country, even though the roots are there. America is their country. And I think there's this guy, Gabriel Salguero, that describes it as learning to live within the hyphenated reality. In other words, you're never really Mexican, but you're never really American, you know? Like, so if you're Mexican, you know a little bit of that yourself, you know? You're never really like, you know, full Mexican. And many years ago, there was Jennifer Lopez actually played, I think her first big movie was playing Selena.
Yeah.
And Selena was this Tex-Mex amazing superstar singer. It was a young girl that just had this rhythm with something that was just coming out called Techno Cumbia. I mean, sister had rhythm, man.
Selena's my movie, man.
Oh, man. Selena's amazing.
Dude, Selena is my movie, and me and my wife love watching Selena.
Oh, man.
And it gave me eyes into this Tex-Mex world that was so massive. Go ahead.
And so at one point, Selena, she's Texan, you know, and then she was born and raised in Texas, and her father was born and raised in Mexico. He came, and so anyways, so she's grown up speaking English, but she notices that singing in Spanish, it's just, I mean, if you're in Texas, you have to sing in English and sing in Spanish, and so she's becoming a superstar in Texas, in America, and of course, it's overflowing into Mexico, and so. From Mexico, one of the largest cities in Mexico, Monterrey, in northern Mexico, they invite her to go and sing. And she's like super excited. She's talking to her dad, and there's a scene where the father, the son, and Selena, and they're talking. And so she says, Dad, they invited me to Mexico.
Yep.
And the father says, well, you're not going.
Right.
And she's like, well, why not? And then he says something that is amazing. So I'll put it in a different context for me. So I have 4 older daughters, you know, and they were all born right here.
Sure.
You know, so that's the other extreme of me. I was born in Mexico. They were born here, and we have all called Little Village for the last 30 years our home. So one day my wife tells me, hey, they're showing Selena downtown in the grassy area right next to Navy Pier. There's like an auditorium that's open, it's all grass, and it's like an outdoor screen. And so I I'm taking my daughters. So all my daughters are like, let's go. and so we got there, and I start seeing in Facebook, social media, back then Facebook, like everybody I know is going. So I'm like, hey, instead of getting there at 7 right before the movie, let's get there at 3. We take, tortas, we eat there, have a picnic. And so we showed up, take our little section with our blanket. I'm sitting there, laying there in the grassy area with my daughters, about to watch the movie. When the movie starts, and that scene is happening. So Selena says, Dad, why can't I go to Mexico? And he says, because Selena, you don't understand this. You'll sing, it'll be amazing, but then they're going to want to interview you. And with your Spanish, you are going to be mocked endlessly. And so she stops. And he says, Selena, you don't understand that here for Americans, we need to be twice better to be accepted. And for Mexicans, we need to be twice better to be accepted. What he was saying is you really don't fit in either world really well. And here's what happens. So we're watching the movie, and I'm laying down with my hands behind, just watching, sitting in the grassy area. And unbeknownst to me, I mean, there's like a standing ovation at that very moment. And I looked, and it's my daughters, and I mean, hundreds of other, kids that were born to Mexican parents in the States, and they are clapping. And I look, and one of my daughters just has tears in her eyes. I mean, just tears in her eyes. And I realize, wow, this is a reality. And it's not my reality. I can go to Mexico tomorrow. I'll be there. Nobody will think that I'm not Mexican. But she goes to Mexico, and the moment she opens her mouth, they'll be mocking her. She doesn't belong, But then in America, she doesn't belong as well. So
the hyphenated reality.
Oh, man, that's it. Those are 2 extremes of life. And so anyway, we could talk a lot more about that. But that was a powerful awakening moment for me to understand the young people in my community. They're my daughters. They're my sons.
That is so interesting. Just from a race perspective, like in the church, I don't know much of that, and so that's why I'm learning here, because we look at someone Mexican just like somebody would look at someone black and assume No, you're Mexican. You know everything about Mexican culture.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like,
We don't ever consider the hyphenated reality,
Yeah.
right? We assume that you can go to Mexico tomorrow,
Yes.
and everything will be just fine. But living in this space, your daughter's living in this space where they never feel quite like they belong because of their ethnic difference or their ethnic complexity in this particular case.
Yeah.
And so how do you feel like the eyes of the world on you? I mean, a lot of your ministry seems to be in Little Village. You've been there 30 years, but I know that you come out of there and do ministry as well. Do you navigate the complexities of the church even just with this weight of I'm a Mexican dude, or my accent, or am I understood? Like my history. What's
Oh man, those are heavy questions.
Yeah.
And, I mean, even heavier to just look inside and feel like, do I really feel like a full man? When I'm among other people that are not like me, that don't even know me, do I feel like 100% or do I not? And I feel like I would say a couple of things. It's interesting that at this very moment, all these immigrants are arriving from Central America, Central and Northern South America, Northern South America, into Chicago, and they are moving primarily into African American neighborhoods, and so the questions that I had never thought were going to come up, which I hadn't thought of. Maybe I wasn't ignoring them. I was just thinking, I never thought we're going to be talking about these questions, but questions of, well, do they belong here or not? And those questions have become really much more vibrant and much more important because there's, the government literally doesn't want, like 50, 60, the estimated official number of people that have arrived into the city of Chicago, might be Chicagoland area. It's around 50,000 official number. But you remember when Jesus fed 5,000 that it was only men. So it must have been good 20,000,
Exactly.
I mean, at least, who knows how many kids were there? I have no idea.
Yeah.
So there's the official, the unofficial. So around 50 something thousands of people officially. Might be more like 100-something thousand
in Chicago,
in Chicagoland area. And so that has brought up conversations that have moved us to do two things. I think one, to understand, well, who am I really? I feel like I can't really enter conversations and be of good cheer and, helpful and of benefit if I don't really know who I am. Who am I? And why did God make me? And the Apostle Paul has a very clear understanding of that. When he's in Athens, he says it was God who made the nations and separated them and borders. And he did this so that we could search him, and maybe even grasping, we would find him. He's so close to us. And then, of course, he's going to go on and develop an entire theology. In the book of Ephesians, he talks about just getting rid of the hostility between groups and, but anyways, so who am I really? And then, how do I love people that are different than me? And I feel like that, I feel like there is not one culture that is able to express all of God's beauty. We need the conglomeration of all cultures to express how beautiful our God is. There's no way that he loves one nation more than others.
That's right.
It's in the unity of all these nations and the different styles and the different particularities of seeing things. And, then we find the God who is the God of all nations.
That's right. That's right.
And I feel like that those three questions are really important. Who is God? Who am I? And how do I love people that are different? How do I not just love, but affirm and enjoy, differences?
That's right.
And, those things are hard to talk about and to think about. Because they always begin soul searching.
Soul searching first.
Yeah.
Like, how do we, serious, I don't know where to start with the migrant.
Yeah.
They call it the migrant crisis. I don't know if that's appropriate or not.
No,
I don't know where to start with it. I don't know how to view it other than I know that Christ has called us, right, to then be present with.
Yes.
From my estimation, to be present with the migrant or the other, or those who weren't here, to welcome in the stranger, so to speak.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
The migrant crisis, is it a crisis of like racial crisis? Like, we don't want you here?
Yeah.
Or is it a crisis of like resource? We don't have the resource to facilitate it?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you help us understand what's going on here? What are we supposed to be doing? What is the church supposed to be doing?
Well, I would say two big things. On one side, I feel like every great migration flows out of crisis. So in the book of the Old Testament, for example, the book of Ruth, and David comes out of this great hunger that happens in the land of bread, which is Bethlehem, So in the land of bread, there's no bread, there's hunger. And so they have to go to the worst possible place, which is Moab, which Moab is like the enemies, It's like the conquest backwards. They're like going out instead of coming in to the promised land. They're leaving the promised land. And so when you think about that, it's like what moved them to go there is, it's a crisis. There's hunger.
So every migration is birthed out of a crisis.
Yeah. And the fourth chapter, you get David, the grandfather of David. It comes right out of the marriage of, what's his name? I just forgot, but and Naomi's grandson, and now she says, don't, now Naomi means joyful. And at some point she says, call me Mara, because I've lost everything. But now in chapter 4, she finally literally is carrying in her hands the grandfather of King David. And this is going to become the king of Israel. It's interesting that, back in the 40s, was it the great migration of people coming from the southern United States to the northern cities.
My family's a part of that.
Created a lot of churches. A lot of movements. It's interesting.
My grandfather's a pastor. Migrated from Arkansas up to Chicago to the west side. And spent 40 plus years as a pastor in K-Town on the west side in Lawndale, which is where my history's from.
Oh, that's amazing. And that was a Jewish neighborhood that was turned, it's like all these Jewish synagogues turned into Baptist churches.
Baptist black churches,
It's like, man, filled with that, which it's amazing. We almost never think about that, but think about the back in the 1800s, the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was this great awakening in the especially in the rural areas in the United States, right outside the 13 colonies. In other words, people have moved, and most of those are migrants and are poor, and there's this great awakening. And I've been thinking for the last couple of years, just thinking about all these immigrants showing up, is that that God seems to, the longer I walk with the Lord, of course I can't tell you what God does, but I've noticed that many times He answers things in not the way I asked Him. Like, all right, God, I have a perfect plan. I would love for you to do A, B, and C. And I think God is going to end up answering exactly what I wanted in A, B, and C, but not how I thought He should do it. Completely the opposite.
That's right.
And I keep on thinking, I feel like when the church gets to a point when they've been asking and seeking revival, God answers, but in a very different way. And it's interesting because I've seen a lot of these migrants arrive, and this is the constant testimony here. They said, we left Venezuela or Colombia or Peru, whatever it is. And the people that consistently helped us through every single country, Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, the border, then Chicago. The people that are consistently helping us are Christians. And here's what people have said. Two things. He said, I can't remember any of their names, most of their names, but I can remember that they told me about Jesus.
Ooh, come on.
Which I feel like.
So this is happening.
This is happening. 7, 8 countries where people who would be far from God or close to God, whatever it is, they have met Jesus on the way. They don't remember names. Like, I don't remember that guy in Mexico, but I remember he told me about Jesus. He gave me food, and he said, hey, can I pray for you? And, I don't remember that guy in Honduras, but, I remember he prayed for me. I don't remember that family, but they like a Bible believing, and they told me about Jesus. So anyways, people who are like literally, and then another guy told me, which I've heard consistently, you have to go through a jungle. And this jungle, people die. Like everybody talks about literally walking, and there's cadavers around there. Like people who have gone before, they fall down, or there's no stores, there's no food. So people literally starve to death. And so they're walking by. And he was saying, as you cross this jungle, this is the only place from Alaska all the way down to Argentina where there's a road. It's called the Pan American Highway. It goes all the way from the continent, the top continent, to the bottom of the continent. And that's the only way where the road is broken, because it's so dense, this jungle. It's called the Darien Gap. And he said the only thing that you would hear in the Darien Gap for the most part is just feet splashing on mud. It was like,
yeah.
You would hear breathing, deep breathing, like, and then you would hear people saying, God, help me, God, help me, God, help me. And he was saying, I've never realized that in the hardest places in the world, that's the altar where people who never cry out to God, they're crying out to God constantly. And then they finally arrive in Chicago, and we help them to go into a home. And then we pray with them, and we say, you're home. And they literally like leave their bags after shelters, walking, So many of them are abducted by cartels. And, now we're finally home. And what they most want is go to Jesus, say thank you.
Okay, Paco.
Like, bam! I mean, like, how would revival come? Isn't it like our God?
Yeah.
Who, like, through the total, I mean, here's like churches crying out, like, God, revival. And here's God saying, I'm answering with revival, but in very different ways than you've ever expected.
Oh, man. Okay, you just preached the migrant crisis to me.
Yeah.
So let me make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Yeah. You're saying that what we see as the migrant crisis and what is actually portrayed on news media, behind that is a migration out of crisis.
Yes.
People looking for better, very much like, or not very much, but similar to the Great Migration that my family came out of from the South, right? Crisis.
Back in which years? Around?
This was back in the 60s, 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
But on the journey, they are encountering Christ at various spaces.
Yeah.
Let's say 7 countries of being helped by the Christian. They go through then, which is pretty much a death valley.
Yeah.
Calling out to God.
Death Valley. Oh.
They get to Chicago, and then those who are on the ground, because your church is a part of welcoming migrants. We say we're going to give you a home, and give you a place to be seen, to be loved. So they've encountered revival through the mud,
and they're passionate about Jesus. And just like last month, we baptized like 35 people at the lake. We've never baptized 35 people in 1 year, and we're like baptizing in 1 month, 35 people.
Migrants,
a lot of them migrants, not all of them, but most of them. And just super hungry. And not only that, very deeply involved in discipleship classes and putting into action their faith. And we're literally on a Sunday praying, I need a job. So we pray, and then that week get texts. I got a job. Praise Jesus. I feel like literally you saw God answering your prayer. Now, on the other side, here's the other thought that I feel like it's deeply important. So we have Mayor Brandon Johnson, an African-American mayor after, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, African-American, which hadn't happened since Washington, and since Mayor Washington, Harold Washington. And in a city that has been African-American for a long time, which is super interesting, I contend that in the next 20 or 30 years, these migrants will be at the center of society in Chicago, in the city of Chicago.
I believe that, man.
And if they're passionate about Jesus now, and we disciple them well, in 20 years, like the swinging of the pendulum swung complete. I feel like the church should be saying, hey, I mean, whether you're here or not, you're here, you're gonna stay. So let's help you to become a deeply developed, strong, passionate follower of Jesus, so that 20 years down the road, when your children are becoming the mayor of the city of Chicago, it will be a more beautiful, more life-giving city with God all over it.
That's so good.
Those people in government, those people in schools, those people, running hospitals.
So welcome the migrants. Disciple them.
Yeah.
Make a home. And let that be the seed by which in the future,
long term,
they will be wouldn't that be powerful?
Yeah.
You talk about racial unity and reconciliation.
Yeah.
That brings me. I've been wanting to ask you this. The irony of the city of Chicago, in these spaces in Chicago that are black mainly, migrants coming into these spaces, Brandon Johnson being the president, Lori Lightfoot, the mayor, Lori Lightfoot, previous mayor. I have a Mexican friend who's a pastor, and him and I, around George Floyd, had a conversation.
Yes. Wow.
And he told me something that I had never heard before. He said, me as a Mexican, my lineage was taught a negative view of black people.
Oh, yes.
And he said that, he said that there is racisms between Mexican and black. Now, here's what's funny about this.
Yeah.
I never in my life knew that was a reality because like my Mexican brothers and sisters, it was always like, we're in the same.
Yeah.
We're in the same boat. You know what I mean?
Cool.
And especially growing up in Chicago, it's like we knew the Mexican neighborhoods, we knew the black neighborhoods. So I didn't know that there was antagonisms there. So what he was saying for me, brother, I want to personally repent for the negative stereotypes that I've had towards black, because we were taught that those people are dangerous. Those people are. Is that real?
Oh yeah, I think, man, you're hitting way deep below, man.
Yeah,
I feel like the spirit of the age runs on the power to alienate one against another.
Exactly.
And, oh my goodness, yeah.
Right.
And that spirit of the age, like whether you call it white supremacy or white people don't want that. No one wants that. No one wants this division of suspicion between one group and the other. And I feel like who benefits from all that? I think the spirit of the age. I don't think any of us benefit, man. I mean, the fact that you and I are brothers and we can enjoy that, it would make me richer to know you, to experience you. But if we meet in the street and there's suspicion from one to another, something else some other force is greater right there, separating us than pushing us forward, man. And that's why it's clear that Jesus broke the wall of hostility, the division of.
But then you always have that spirit of the age coming in to find ways to polarize communities. And I was actually talking with
them against us.
I was very intrigued by Jonathan Tran, who Asian American, and he wrote Asian Americans and the Spirit of Racial Capitalism.
Yeah.
And in that, it's the same thing you're talking about here.
Yeah.
I wondered as a kid why we had all these Asian shops in the black community, right? But then there was always this kind of cynicism, like, you know what I mean? And he teaches about racial capitalism, economy, how these spaces are used to kind of ensconce, racisms and money, et cetera, et cetera. But then I talked to some other Asian friends who said the same thing, that it's like the spirit of the age has tried its best to pit cultures amongst each other.
Yeah.
Some of this is white supremacy at the root.
Yeah.
Some of this is just kind of carnality. But realize that the relationship we had with Asians in our community was just so bad.
Yeah.
because of the same reason. Like, we're going to profit off of a black dollar. Yeah. But we are also taught that me and you are not alike, right? Yeah. So it's the model minority type thing.
Oh man, yeah.
So it's I think you said it right. The spirit of the age. Yeah. But what I want to get at is with this podcast, with our pastoral ministry scholarship, is that God is restoring that.
Yes.
God is restoring the beauty of difference. Yes. And us living out that tension with one another. I come to Little Village, I'm not going to know what to do. But I can call Paco.
Oh, yeah.
And say, man, tell me about what I'm feeling here. Tell me about what's going on here. And same thing for you in other neighborhoods of our city. But I think it's beautiful that we are leaning into the power of true gospel-centered reconciliation. Yes. And so thank you for answering that for me, because I want to confirm that was a reality.
That's real good.
You know what I mean?
Good. Hey, I'm super excited about this next season in the life of the church in America. I feel like there's some people that are, calling out doom and all that kind of stuff. No. Man, I am excited about what God is doing. Yeah. Just came from a couple of college campuses, and I love seeing Christian campuses that are now becoming so much more diverse. And you walk in, you feel like, hey, I feel like I'm in any high school in Chicago, man. Like, this is awesome. Yeah. And, out of the blue, somebody's like, hey, Pastor Paco. I was like, I don't even know you, but man, that's awesome. Give me a hug. And I feel like something that is not publicized in media is going on, and is really good. It is, the best we can describe it is just the church awakening to its true reality.
I believe
there's nothing like the church in every language. When you look at the Chicagoland area, I mean, Christians are all kinds of colors, hues, ethnicities, backgrounds, and we're one family.
That's right.
Like, man, if only we would wake up to that amazing power.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I'm excited about that.
Me too. I'm with you on that, man. Yeah. I want to ask you something. In light of this election season we're in, like what is the posture of the Mexican community?
Yeah.
And hear me, bro. I know you don't only serve the Mexican community.
Sure.
Just like I don't represent all black people, right?
That's right.
but maybe in a generalized sense, like for black people, we've been wrestling with how to enter into election conversations.
That's good.
Right? You have like the Kamala Trump thing. Yeah. You have like the Democrat Republican thing. You have all that polarization. But how is Little Village doing in light of election?
Oh man,
how are you leading your church through that?
That's a good question. I've been talking a lot more about Jubilee. I feel like we almost have like a third option. Remember when Joshua, encounters the angel of the Lord? Yeah, like, hey, are you for us? Are you against us? And he's like, neither. Which I feel like that's an amazing encounter. How would God not be for Joshua? How would the angel of the Lord say, you know what? Of course I'm with you, man.
Right.
I'm the angel of the Lord. But he says neither, which I feel like is super incredibly shocking. Mm-hmm. Like, you're supposed to be in our side. We're like the promised land, promised people, the promised land, the chosen people, promised land. And I think what he was saying, in essence, there's a greater reality that we need to be awakened to. And I think the election every 4 years, a couple of thoughts that I have. Every 4 years, it almost becomes a little bit of a distraction from getting deeper into the mission of loving people and breaking the barriers and crossing borders between one another. If nothing else, the conversations that arise out of a very divided nation, I think that's our opportunity. So whenever I think of hyphenated people, I feel like, Mexican, American, I think that, for example, my children live on the hyphen, not on the Mexican, not on the Americans. And I think that's what we were talking about, you and I, before we started. I think the church is awakening to the fact that we have always known how to live in the hyphen, especially the brown church, like the color church has always known how to live and how to navigate this extension, these extremes, saying we know how to live right here in the middle, how to love on the right side, how to love on the left side.
Right.
It's interesting. I feel like people of color tend to be a lot more conservative socially, but politically much more, to the left or however you say it, which makes us way less. I think more and more we're becoming way less one-party people, but intra-party. In other words, we can literally navigate both worlds. And I feel like the people that are living on the extremes, they don't know how to navigate those worlds. I think we're entering. I don't know if I'm making it clear, but I think we're entering into a new reality, a new season of life, a new decades in which the church has been battling with how to be itself well. Will live in the hyphen real well.
Without having to attach to one or the other.
You don't belong here. You don't belong here. Man, we belong to a different reality, which is more beautiful, in which everybody has a place. Everybody can be fully loved.
It's funny because I don't want to minimize or dilute the reality of elections and justice and neighborhoods. But the Bible does say that this is not our home, right?
Oh,
so Paul's like, well, your citizenship is in heaven. And I'm not saying that to dilute the reality of citizenship and American politics, etc. But there is this sense of persons of color have learned to live. I mean, I'm a Black American. Yeah. But there's sometimes when I'm here in Westmont, I don't feel like what's going on. I'm not home. You know what I mean? And sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't feel at home. Depending on what neighborhood we drive through. Because we're not the majority, and it's kind of our nation is pent really on sort of the white majority frame and perspective. So what you're saying is, as opposed to saying I'm with this party or this party, persons of color teach us that we can I don't care whoever you choose, we've learned to live with a third party. We've learned to live in the hyphen.
And that means that we are not less engaged. That means that we're even more engaged. More engaged where it matters.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes the political divides can create kind of false dichotomies that we should still be at the center of where people need help, where people need to be loved. And I feel like so our calling is not to be less engaged,
right?
But to not sort of. I always think about this scene. I can't remember the movie, but it's like the president is telling this guy, is like, "Hey, you're gonna do this," and he says, "Mr. President," it was Harrison Ford says, "Mr. President, sorry, but I don't dance." I love that. I feel like I tell this debate of hating one side to the other. I say, as Christians, we don't dance that one. I'm sorry, that tune's not our tune. We have a tune that moves us to be much more engaged than just, being on social media yelling at one another or something like that.
I hate that,
it's
bro.
like, let's get more engaged, let's get our hands in the dirt and work.
Well, I learned that the people that are yelling are not doing anything.
I probably doing way less.
Bro, here's the deal. Like if I was preaching this on Sunday morning, I would be saying it doesn't matter if we get red or blue.
Yes. Yeah.
We still have to feed the poor.
Yes.
We still have to clothe the naked.
Yeah.
We still have to welcome the widow.
Yeah. Amen.
We still have to love the migrant, right?
Yeah.
We still have to be present in our neighborhood and our community. And I think the church, when we get caught up in the depths of political division, we just forget that there's also work that's like,
oh man,
listen, government is not going to fix the work that the church needs to be doing on the ground.
Amen.
Policies may help and enforce. We do need policy that gives justice and fairness in certain respects. But at the bare bones, I got to go outside, and I got to love people that are outside my door.
Yeah.
No matter who's in office.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah.
It's the work of the church.
Amen.
It's the work of the gospel.
Amen.
You know what I mean?
Praise
and
God.
so again, I think both me and Paco are not saying to disengage or to dilute the reality of that we have an election, that we need leaders, that we need. But the work is going to continue, bro.
It's going
The
to continue.
gospel's going to continue.
And I feel like the biggest extent of our presence and our witness will be to love those who deeply judge us. You know, so whether you hate me, I'm still called to love you. You know, it's like Jesus said, "Pray for those who hate you, love those who persecute you." So if whether you judge me, you know, like the true evidence of the presence of Jesus will be whether I can love you, even if you judge me, hate me, or, you know, dislike me, or are totally against me. It's like, how can I love you? You know, how can I serve you?
That's good.
And,
So you see a hope for reconciliation, racial unity.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on like the future of the multi-ethnic church?
Oh man.
You know, the studies are showing that 2050 persons of color will be the majority.
Yeah.
I am actually a proponent and a champion for black-led or color-led multi-ethnic churches.
Yes.
Where we call for the reconciliation.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we're going to call for it. Do you see any hope in the future of the multi-ethnic church?
Man, I'm super excited about it. Now, here's one thing. I am 54 years old, and I think it's important, but it's not urgent. It's not like emergency, but I feel like people like me need to give way to people who are coming behind and create spaces for younger leaders, you know, of color, and mentor well, and white and people of color, you know, there's all kinds of people mentor into this this original reality. Is not a new reality. It's an original reality. We're really going back to saying, well, what is church really like? And I think it behooves people like me, you know, past our 50s, to say, I lead by creating spaces for others and who are younger, who come behind. Because I am absolutely 100% hopeful, man. Super excited about this new generation, these new generations behind me. I look back.
Well, the neighborhoods are changing, bro.
Man.
I was at my kids.
It is.
I was at my son's. We live in a pretty diverse neighborhood.
Yeah.
I was at my son's open house the other night.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the parents. They were there. There's like a Muslim family, a Mexican family. I know these folks. They're Ukrainian.
Yes.
We have some white and like my kids' friends. There's not one color. The neighborhoods are diversifying, and it's funny because the people who are natives to these neighborhoods don't know yet, especially white people.
Wow.
They don't know yet that the neighborhood is changing. And because I'll survey them, I'll ask them, I'll say, do you know that these families are moving in over here? They're like, no, we don't know. A funny joke in Westmont, the black people don't come outside. I don't know like what Mexican people do, but like they're like, we never see black people come outside. We don't come outside. Like we'll sneak out Cass Road and we'll go to the city and go hang out, and then we'll come back home, but we don't come outside. But when you go to Wingstop or go to a restaurant and you see groups of kids now in our neighborhood, it's not one color.
Yeah.
Latino, black, white, there's African, Muslim. Like there is something happening in our neighborhoods where we won't have a choice.
Yeah.
We won't have a choice but to lean into a multi-ethnic ecclesiology.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, with the changing now, my friend Daniel Yang writes a lot on I mean, he's writing some stuff on immigrants and how I shouldn't be quoting something that I don't even know if I'm quoted right, but
kind of like this. Paraphrase.
Forgive me, Yang. But he talks about how emerging out of the soil of America over the next coming years are the immigrants who have now made this home and will then become the next leaders.
Yes.
Of this nation.
Amen.
In a way that brings such a fresh revival. Does that make you excited?
That gets me super excited.
Okay.
There's never been a country. I mean, this is a large country. There's never been a country that has hosted that many people in which there's not going to be one majority. Like, you know, to this scale. I mean, there's been countries, but to this scale, I feel like the American dream continues to be a new experiment. And I'm for one, man, I'm excited. I see Jesus in the middle of it. And
you know, in the so many seasons, Paco, that I've been discouraged in the work of the gospel here, in a multi-ethnic work, it might be that Jesus is at the center of reviving this country.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you feel about this. I tell our church often, I feel like we're still a part of the seed planting for then what our kids are going to take in the future.
Yeah.
That we may not see sort of the fruit of this rising up of persons of color. And by the way, this is funny, but it's true. Persons of color and black people are not trying to take over America, right? Like this is not a get back at you, you know?
Yeah.
It is the beauty of difference that then leads us in a way that only we can get from Mexicans, that only we can get from your history. There's a beauty, there's a culture, there's a spirituality that we can only get from African slaves, African Americans, from white leaders, that you know, from Latino, from Asian, Indian. And if we have a lot of that going on, this is going to be a crazy country for the gospel.
Man. Yes.
And to see Jesus move, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyways, we're getting excited over here.
Oh, man, super excited. Hey, this past Sunday, we did this cultural Sundays. A late immigrant from Venezuela, she said, hey, Pastor, can we have one Sunday in which we don't have a regular service? We have it outside in the neighborhood. And we give opportunity to different cultures that are represented here in our church to just shine, you know? So people, I could not have anticipated how much effort, like Colombians gathered together, and then they send pictures. I'm like thinking, this is going to be bigger than I ever thought. So we didn't have a regular Sunday morning service. We didn't have any of our services. We just had one Sunday morning service out in the street. And the neighborhood showed up in mass. I mean, it was like just, you know, people inviting people to come and celebrate what God is doing. And then I gave a gospel-centered message. And then we had we play soccer. Every country played against one another. Yeah. And, you know, I'm sad to say that Mexico did not even get any closer to winning. You know, like Venezuela won, which I was like, oh, man. But it was like, you know, Guatemalans, Venezuela. There was a guy from Russia who showed up with his wife, and they had a table filled with Ossetian food. I was like, never tasted Ossetian food. Yeah. I never even knew there was a region in the world called Ossetia. And he talked about it. He shared food. People showed up. People celebrated his country. He had his flag. And, you know, it's like, I feel like the church, we are God's genius. You know, I mean, on one side, of course, every pastor knows is incredibly it feels very fragile.
Right.
On the other side is the power of God, and He's been building His church, man.
Right.
And so I think it goes way beyond what we could ever even plan or think. You know, let's build this kind of church. It's like God is doing something way bigger than what we could plan to do for His bride. You know, just have to take care of the bride.
What would you say? Let's end here. Like, what would you say? How would you preach to us the need for unity?
Oh, man.
Now, I don't mean like the unity like kumbaya. I mean the messiness of unity.
Oh, man.
Like, we're gonna step on each other's toes. I'm not gonna know how to say what to say. Is hilarious. I don't even know if this is appropriate. My
Bring it on, man.
You know, black people on the west side of Chicago, where I'm from, like every Latino was Mexican.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean? So it was just kind of what we go through. We drive through Cicero, it's Mexican. We go to Berwyn or whatever, it's Mexican. That's what we assume. Sure. And so I was in college. I was in the dorm room, and I was joking with a friend of mine who was Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, man, dude, you Mexicans, blah 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 blah. Paco, he went off on me.
Oh man, like
I said, bro, I'm sorry. Should I not have said Mexican? I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, I know Mexicans. Like, I'm from Chicago. He's like, no, I'm Puerto Rican and I'm proud of it. And I didn't know that there was like a very distinguished difference between.
Huge distinct. Yeah.
Dude, I learned my lesson. From that day forward, I'm always like, okay, so what Latino descent are you? What are you?
Yeah, tell me a little bit more.
Tell me a little bit more, man. But how would you preach to us to say, hey, unity is messy. This is what King showed us in the civil rights era. Like, this is going to be, this yearning for unity is going to be bloody. Like, take a moment, preach to us, encourage us that we have to do it.
Oh man, yes,
right?
Amen. I would say so. Jesus shows up, and Matthew, every one of the four Gospels has the opportunity of how in the world am I going to present Jesus? Yeah. Matthew presents Jesus with the Sermon on the Mount, and the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus shows up. Very first words: "Blessed are the poor." I feel like it's always shocking. Jesus grabs something and turns it upside down. Whatever everybody's thinking, like, them against us. Jesus like, whoosh, that's your brother. Like, that's your sister. The one, like, and so anyways, blessed are the poor, blessed are those who weep, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who are hungering and thirsting for justice. I always think of people who are running away from their country. They're not just coming here to go to Disney World or something like that. They're running away, deeply hungering and thirsting for justice. I mean, you and I know what it means to, in our communities, we have seen how people just do not get justice. If you're hungry and thirsting for justice, I'm building a kingdom, not in the future, right now, where people will experience justice, and he says, and they will be satisfied. I love that. Blessed are the merciful, especially to those who don't deserve mercy. Whatever, when you choose, like when you decide, that guy doesn't deserve mercy, it's just saying, blessed are the ones who give mercy freely, because you will receive mercy. Blessed are those who work hard at looking at their own heart, pure in heart, because they will see God in action. They will see God in action. The works of God will become very evident to them. And then blessed are the ones who work for peace, peacemakers, the bridge builders. I feel like that's what I would say, man. Jesus begins by saying, all right, you don't know me, here's me. Blessed are all those who the culture and the system has told you they're not blessed, they're cursed. And I am creating a kingdom where all those people who are at the bottom will see themselves and will be like, man, lucky me. The Message translation says, lucky you. Lucky you of being this, like, because I'm creating a kingdom where you will fit. And then Jesus says this: blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice, be exceedingly glad, because you are a prophetic presence in the world. And then he describes that prophetic presence by saying, you are salt. You are light. May people see your good way of living, your actions. See your works and celebrate and glorify your Father in heaven. In other words, are called to be a prophetic presence in this world. Will not be prophetic if we're not shaking with God. Like what the world says is up is really down. What says it's down is really up. You are a prophetic presence if you're living this way. If you're celebrating the fact that I'm creating a kingdom where there's room for everyone. So, anyways, Jesus. It doesn't get better than Jesus' Sermon on the Mount.
I just got saved all over again. I'm giving my life to Jesus again. Man. That's what I'm talking about, bro. Amen. That's what I'm talking about,
and that's
Paco.
The Jesus that is going to... Man, I'm excited about this future. With you, Greg, man, I'm super excited about what God has ahead for us.
Bro, we're going to continue this work.
Amen.
And we're going to see the gospel shaped in our communities.
Yes.
And I'm coming to a little village.
Amen.
And I need some good food.
Hey, yeah.
All right.
Come and preach in our congregations. Oh, man. That should be fun. Dude, and then we'll switch.
Please. Come here.
Yeah.
Dude, I love you, man. I'm proud of the work that you're doing. Don't stop praying for this new season as you're just like thinking about like generations coming to continue to work. Amen. And look, we love y'all. Gospel and Race Podcast. Amen. I'm full.
Yeah.
We'll see y'all next episode.
God
Peace.
bless you.